Hi, Fran. Thanks so much for joining us on Britain's Birth Stories podcast.
Hiya.
Hi. So can you tell everyone where you're based and who is in your family?
Yeah, of course. So I am in Bracknell, which is it's in Berkshire, it's near kind of Ascot way. Most people know Ascot rather than Bracknell.
Right.
And I live with my husband. We actually got married during the pandemic, so that was an interesting one. And we had our little daughter Shelby in 2018, kind of back end of 2018. So yeah, it's the three of us here currently.
Amazing. And what is your job apart from obviously caring for your family?
So I had the opportunity, so in September this year, I knew it was coming. It just so happened that kind of COVID hit at the same time, but I actually got made redundant from a fashion buying role.
Right.
And I decided to go all in with becoming a doula and doing hypnobirthing.
Wow.
So since January this year, I've kind of gone in and do that now.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure we'll get into that later on as well.
Yes.
Amazing, that's great to hear. So why don't we go into your pregnancy with Shelby? Was this something you'd planned, or was this something that happened unexpectedly, or?
It was kind of a bit of both. So me and my now husband, we'd been together for 8 years, and I kind of decided, like, I'd been on my pill for kind of since I was about 15,
Right.
and I was like, right, I felt like I just needed a break. So we kind of had the chat, and it was kind of like not taking anything, kind of not protected in any way. So if it happens, it's going to happen. Like there is a chance.
Yeah.
And I think it was about pretty much a year to the day after I stopped taking my pill, I found out that I was pregnant.
Wow. All right. And how did you feel about that when you found out?
I was quite excited. It was the morning I found out, because I can remember waking up and I thought, oh, something feels different. And I couldn't quite put my hand on it. And for some reason, I mean, as you do, I just had a pregnancy test in the cupboard.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I'm just going to try. So I took the test, and then I got in the shower, kind of got on with it. And then I thought, oh, I better have a look. And I was like, oh, my God. And I was a bit kind of like, oh, I don't really know what to do now. Because I almost instantly felt different.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to explain. It's almost like instantly, you know, like, I'm great. There's something in there now.
Right. And what about your partner? How was your partner feeling about it all?
Well, when I first told him, so I kind of had to then go to work and kind of keep it a secret all day, kind of get on with work and knowing.
Yeah.
And when I got home, my first reaction was I just burst out crying, and I was like, "I'm really sorry." I was like, "But I'm pregnant." And yeah, he just gave me a big hug and was like, "Okay." And we were both a bit like, "Don't really know what to do now."
Oh, that's amazing. And in terms of birth, what were your thoughts about birth at that point in your life?
Well, I think because I kind of thought, I don't know, I feel like I've always luckily kind of had people around me who've been quite like positive about it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like in my head I thought, well, it's now happened, so either way this baby's coming out, whether it was kind of C-section or vaginally. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to deal with either way.
Yeah. All right. No, that's good to hear that you had some type of positivity around birth, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. It definitely changed, especially when I speak to some of my friends who, when they found out, their first reaction was, I don't want to hear anything about birth. Like, I don't want to know anything, and I'll just deal with it because all I hear is all the negative stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, I was kind of very much like, well, I know it's got to come out, and I think it's also in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, people tend to have, or it's quite common that people have more than one baby. So yeah. I was like, well, we put ourselves through it more than once usually.
Exactly, yeah. And did you know where or how you'd like to birth at that point?
Well, I think this is where at the time I was still quite naive. And I can remember going to my first midwife appointment, and I was thinking, well, first of all, when I rang the doctor, and I said, I think I'm pregnant, don't really know what to do. And they were like, okay, we'll book you in for an appointment. And I think the first appointment isn't until kind of like the 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember which one it is. And I can remember like, okay, so I've got to wait all this time, like thinking, okay, well, I've taken like a few tests and they've come back positive, so I'm assuming they're correct.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, one of the first questions I got asked was, so where are you? Actually, no, the question was, what hospital are you giving birth at? Like, it wasn't kind of, what's your plan? It was kind of straight in with, okay, which hospital around here will you be going to? And I was like, okay, well, not only have I not thought about where I want to give birth, let alone which hospital I want to go to.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Was that fairly straightforward for you in terms of making that decision, or?
Well, luckily, I knew. So my husband's sister had a little boy, and she was saying that she had in one of our. There's kind of two hospitals that are about the same distance.
Yeah.
But one of them. There tends to be quite a lot of traffic around the area, whereas the other one, it's not as bad, it's more back roads. And she was like, I chose Frimley purely because it was kind of closer and I was hoping there wasn't going to be any traffic. And so I was just like, yeah, I'll go to that one. But actually, when after the appointment, actually kind of then did some research and looked at it, then I was like, oh, okay, this actually does look really nice, and everyone's got really positive, like kind of stories about it. So I was like, okay, yeah, it must be okay.
Oh wow.
But now looking back, I'm like, oh, it's a shame that I didn't talk about things like home birth a bit more, because now I think if I have another one, I would love to have a home birth and actually be. I think it would have helped with a lot of the worries that I did have at the time, if that was kind of an option to kind of talk through, rather than straight in with, oh, so which hospital will it be? And especially at kind of 6 weeks, and I kind of thought they might double check and do a test on me when I first went to my appointment, and it was just kind of all a bit kind of, okay, right, make the plan and do all of this. And I was like, God, I'm only 6 weeks, like, okay.
Yeah, I get what you mean. And in terms of your pregnancy, how was that for you?
Mine was very straightforward. Actually, I had a bit of morning sickness, but it was literally just in the mornings, and I tend to be, I think I was physically sick maybe 3 times, and that was about it. And then I wasn't put off by any foods, but I couldn't eat enough donuts. It was donuts that was my thing, that I was just like, I just need a whole box of Krispy Kremes.
Well, worst things to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of support, like, how did you feel during that time? How supported were you?
I think I was very supported with kind of family and friends, and had people there.
Yeah.
But it was a shame the way kind of my local trust work, which I think a lot of trust work kind of across the country, where my midwife wasn't based at my doctor's. They kind of got, I think it was like every Monday they had kind of a whole day of appointments every week.
Right.
And if it wasn't, because it wasn't a specific midwife that was assigned to that doctor's, or it wasn't a team, so if my midwife was on holiday, it would then be someone else that would come in, and then you obviously wouldn't see that person then for another month. And it was kind of in that way, in terms of kind of like, not medical support because I didn't need it, but almost kind of an expert to kind of tell me like, this is normal or this is okay. We kind of had to do a lot more of our own research, because there just wasn't enough of there's just not enough midwives to kind of have that kind of help. And especially because, if I wanted an extra appointment at my doctor's, it was kind of like, well, you'll have to wait until they come in, and it'll be on a Monday, and it's kind of a case of sit in the waiting room and see if they've got some time for you, which was a little bit of a shame.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, it sort of seems like the NHS overall is really overstretched, isn't it? So
Yeah,
that must be horrendous, especially if it's maternity services. So
yeah, that's it. I think the good thing is, because of the experience that I had, I thought, actually, the midwives did an incredible job throughout. And when I did see them, and even if it was a new midwife that I hadn't met, they were so lovely and so kind of helpful when I was there. It was just a shame that they were all rushing around.
Yeah, no, definitely. And now going into the big event, how did labour begin, and how was that for you?
So, because my biggest worry throughout it's probably my only worry throughout pregnancy and labour was especially my mum just kept saying, "Oh, you'll know if you're in labour," and I thought, but how am I going to know? Because I've never done it before like that. I don't know. And then I thought, well, if this isn't it, if I thought I was in labour and this isn't it, if I go to the hospital and they're like, no, like, this is nothing, go back home, or I'm only very much at the start and they tell me to go home, I thought, God, how am I going to deal with the pain if it hurts that much early on that I'm in hospital, but then they tell me to go home? And I thought, oh God, like, this is so but one of my friends actually had her little girl about 4 months before me, and she told me, I said to her, I said, right, I want to know absolutely everything, tell me all the details, I want to know. And my labour pretty much happened at the start of it, happened exactly like hers. So it was really weird. It's almost like in my head I was like, oh, I feel like I actually do know what's about to happen. But I had a KFC for my dinner the night before, and I can remember thinking whilst I was eating it, I was like, once I'd finished, I thought, I think I've eaten that a bit quick, like, I feel like I've got a bit of indigestion or something. So I kind of sat on my like birthing ball that I had, and I was just kind of like bouncing around, and it was kind of like because I was bouncing, you kind of take your mind off it. And then it was all kind of fine. I was a bit like, I definitely feel like I've just got indigestion or heartburn. So went to bed, everything was kind of fine. And I woke up about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And my husband's a baker, so he gets up early anyway. But I got up and I was like, definitely, I feel like I need the toilet. So I went and sat on the toilet and was just kind of on my phone flicking through, because it really woke me up. I felt instantly like wide awake. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll go lay back down. And I laid back down and I thought, no. Got back up again. And then next thing I know, I heard my husband's alarm go off, and it normally goes off about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And he kind of came in and he was like, are you okay? I was like, yeah. I think just feel like I really need the toilet. I'm like, I'm probably just a little bit constipated from the KFC. I was like, it's fine. And he's like, okay. So he carried on getting ready for work, and then I could feel something kind of coming out, and I thought, what's that? And I kind of looked down and I was like, and I can remember my friend describing it, and I thought, that's got to be my mucus plug. And it's only because my friend telling me about it that I knew kind of what was happening. And then I thought, okay, this might be something. But then I also thought, I know that the mucus plug can come out kind of a few days before the actual labour can happen. So I was like, okay. And I said to Max, I said, just take your time. I said, this could be something, but it might not. And then it was probably about 10 minutes after that, I was like, these are definitely contractions. But trying to time them myself was just possible whilst I was trying to kind of get comfortable. And the problem that we had was that Max works with his dad, so it's actually like a family-run bakery.
Right.
So it was kind of like, well, we didn't want to tell his dad too early that he wasn't coming to work, because obviously instantly his mum would then contact my mum, and all the parents would know, and everyone would be like, oh my God, it's happening. And I thought, well, it could be days yet.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think it was kind of good in the back of my mind that I was thinking, oh, well, it could be a really long labour. And I think that's what made it easier for me, because I was like, right, let's just take my time. I ran a bath, got in the bath. I spoke to the midwife on the phone, and because it was a Monday morning, she actually kind of used that as quite a good, almost like excuse. And she kind of said, look, just take your time. She said, it's Monday morning. You don't want to get stuck in rush hour. You don't want to be in the car. I was like, actually, yeah, you've got a good point. I was like, okay. I was like, I'll stay at home. And yeah, I stayed at home for, I think it was, had contractions, sat in the bath, kind of basically just sat on the toilet the whole time, because obviously where you sat on the toilet seat, it's almost like there's no pressure. So it's kind of like, I didn't feel much pain because I was sat there.
Right.
And then every time I had a contraction, I was quite good at kind of breathing through it. And I was like, okay, this is fine. And I think it got to about 9:30, 10. No, it must have been about 9:30 actually. And I said to Max, I was like, okay, I think we really need to go now. I was like, I just want to go to the hospital. I just want to find out, like, where I am now.
Yeah.
And then, we got to the hospital, and I don't know why, but in Frimley, it was in the Mulberry Suite where I could go. So it was a midwife-led unit, but then it was kind of within the hospital, so the labour ward was also kind of attached to it.
Yeah.
But they call it the Mulberry Suite, and it was like a spa when you walked in. It was so nice.
Wow.
But it's on the other side of the building.
Oh, my.
So it was the longest walk of my life.
I bet.
And at one point, Max was like, right, there's a chair. You sit there. Let me double check on what we're going the right way. And there was a doctor that walked past, and he looked at me, and he just said, oh, you look like you're in labour. And I was like, uh-huh. I was like, thanks.
Oh, my.
And then when we got there, we walked in, and there was two midwives kind of waiting, and it was all really nice, like blue and purple dimmed lights, and we got taken into like our own little double room. It was so nice. Which I wasn't expecting at all. But then when there was, I put in my birth plan, one of my things was that I was quite happy to have a student midwife, because, ultimately they've all got to train at some point. So I thought, well, I don't mind specifying that, I'd be quite happily for them to come in and kind of almost talk to me a lot. If they want to talk through things, like, I'm happy to kind of be that person.
Yeah.
So the midwife came in, and she was like checking it. She was like, oh, do you want me to check like how far you are? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I just want to know kind of, actually, am I, like, how far through this am I?
Yeah.
And initially she was like, yeah, I think you're about 6 centimetres.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, that's good. I was like, maybe halfway. And she was like, but I just want to, she was like, do you mind if I just get the more senior midwife just to double check? She was like, because she was like, I don't know whether your cervix is just really thin. She was like, I just want to double check. And I was like, yeah, fine. I was like, I'm happy with the 6 centimetres. Just don't tell me it's any less.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the senior midwife came in, and she checked, and she was like, no, she was like, I think it's because you're actually 9 centimetres. And I was like,
what?
Oh. I was like, sorry.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, in my head, I said to them, I said, my biggest thing about going into labour was the worry that you were gonna tell me I was like 2 centimetres and it's better if I go home rather than
my goodness.
telling me I'm 9.
Yeah.
So then, so they started getting the pool ready for me and everything. So, because I said, I'd quite like to go into the pool and do all that. And I got in there, it was all really nice. And again, I was just chatting to the student midwife. So we were actually talking about holidays and where to go next and all this stuff. And then, whilst I was in the pool, kind of started to feel the urge to push. It's the strangest feeling when people tell you, kind of, your contractions will start to move from below your bump and you'll start to feel them at the top. It's so weird that when it actually does happen, it's like, oh, actually, I can really feel my body trying to push this baby out.
Whoa.
It was really like surreal to be like, oh my God, like I'm actually doing this. But this was kind of the only part of my labour that kind of didn't go to plan. So although my birth was really, really positive, it's actually kind of good to be a positive story, but it didn't go to plan.
Okay, yeah.
So I was in the pool and everything was fine, but because obviously time kind of goes out of your head, I didn't realise that I was actually in the pool for just over 2 hours trying to push. So the midwife was like, oh, maybe if you come out, we'll try you in a different position. Maybe it's just that, you just need to be standing or something. So I was in the room and they had one of these like big scarf things hanging from the ceiling. Oh, yes. So I was kind of like trying to squat with that, which was like, that was so good. That was just so much more comfortable. And then they thought that they had some meconium. So technically I was a week overdue. Well, I was due on the 10th of September, and Shelby arrived on the 17th, but the whole way through my pregnancy I was like, I'm pretty sure my due date's the 16th of September. So although I was on paper a week overdue, I only said that was a day, because the whole time I was like, I'm pretty sure my due date's the 16th.
Yeah.
But obviously because of that, they were like, this is probably why you've got a bit of meconium, because baby's probably gone to the toilet before coming out, blah, blah, blah. So they were like, oh, we might have to now move you because of that, from this lovely room with a double bed and everything and the chair, and we had to move from that room down to the labour ward. And I was like, but it's so nice in here. That they moved me down and everything, and it was all fine, because it's still, obviously, you get your own kind of little private room and everything. But yeah, it was still kind of calm and, breathing through it. And then when it was at one point where I can remember the student midwife said to me, she said, just so you know, baby's heart rate's dropping a little bit. So what we're going to do, because you've been pushing for so long, we're going to get the doctor in, and we're basically going to help get the baby out, like, now, because the heart rate's dropping. And I was just like, yeah, okay, yeah. I think at this point I was starting to go into kind of like the transition stage of being like, okay, yeah, I can't do this anymore, just get this baby out. And then when the doctor actually came in, I had to have a oh God, the word's gone out of my head. They had to cut me a little bit.
Episiotomy.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So I had to have an episiotomy, only really small, but it was only then that they realised that the cord was actually around her neck. So every time Shelby was trying to come out, she was being pulled back. But they said, because you've been so calm throughout, it's kept her calm. So it's only now that her heart rate is dropping because she's so close to coming out.
Wow.
So I was a bit like, well, that's kind of good, but not.
Well, exactly, yeah.
So then, and then they did that, and then next thing I knew, I was like, oh, here she is.
Wow, that's amazing.
So even from, so I got to the hospital at about 10, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she was born at 3:15. So even all of that was only, I think my labour was recorded at like 4 hours and 15 minutes or something.
That's great.
So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, actually, considering, initially, obviously, no one plans for an episiotomy and nobody wants one necessarily. I was like, oh, actually, even with all of that and, having to give birth in the labour ward when I that wasn't my plan. It actually was quite like straightforward.
Yeah. Wow. And how were the first few hours for you together?
Oh, it was really nice actually, because I didn't realise that. So Shelby's a September baby, and apparently September is one of the busiest months. I mean, It might not be now with all the COVID babies. I feel like January is probably going to be busy next year. But September's normally busy because it's all the Christmas babies. So the postnatal ward was really busy apparently. So they kind of just let us kind of use the room that we gave birth in for kind of the first couple of hours. So they just kind of let us be us three. So I did, all of the phone calls and all of that kind of stuff while it was just us three. I see the tea and toast kind of came in, so it's like the best cup of tea. And yeah, I can remember ringing my mum, and she was at work, and she was like, "Oh, so are you on your way to the hospital?" And I was like, "No, she's here." And my mum was like, "What?" She was like, "When? How did this happen?" She was like, "I spoke to you last night." And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, it just happened.
But yeah, it was really nice. And actually the student midwife was meant to finish kind of halfway through, and she stayed, and kind of we had a little chat, and yeah, it was really nice.
Oh, that's wonderful. And how was feeding for you? Did you initiate that, or did you have other plans in mind?
I always kind of knew I wanted to try breastfeeding. And I can remember I kind of did one of these courses that my local council was running, called Journey to Parenthood, and they kind of said, sometimes babies, if you have them on your chest, obviously they can smell it and they'll move themselves down to try and find it. And that was exactly what kind of Shelby did. She kind of wriggled down, and I was like, oh, this is so weird.
Wow.
And she pretty much latched straight away, which was really good. But it was just throughout the night, although she was latching, I don't know whether it was because the midwife was there, so it was kind of like the help was there if I needed it, but I didn't need it. And then as soon as it came to the middle of the night, and obviously there's less midwives there, and obviously they've got other women to look after, it was kind of like she just would not latch, and then she'd get angry that she wasn't latching. So there was a few times they kind of had to top up with formula. But then as soon as I got home, she didn't need it, so she actually pretty much latched straight away. I don't know whether it's probably just the stress of the hospital and kind of it being the first night that kind of didn't help. But yeah, overall I was lucky that she latched straight away, and lasted for about 10 months. So it was, I think she woke up on a 10-month birthday. And yeah, she just decided that she preferred food over milk. So
oh wow, that's amazing. And how was postnatal life for you? Like, how were you feeling in the first few weeks, and with everything that's changed?
I think, to be honest, I still stand by that the recovery and the postnatal period is worse than the labour. I can remember, even with the episiotomy and everything, I said, I could do the labour again tomorrow.
Right.
But it was almost afterwards of, like, I didn't know about kind of like the day 3 or 4, depending on what day it is, when obviously like all your milk comes in, your hormones are all over the place. And I can remember absolutely crying my eyes out because I couldn't find one of my strappy tops, and I was like, I can't find my top, like absolutely in floods of tears. And I just really wish that I knew more, or there is more help available. It's just that there's so much help available about like pregnancy and labour that, because no one talks about the 4th trimester or anything like that after postnatally, you just think you don't prepare. It's hard to prepare yourself for something you don't know is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of like, because no one talks about it. So yeah, I can remember Max's mum, so my mother-in-law, she was really good, and she was just kind of, even if I was like really upset, she was quite good at just kind of sitting there and not necessarily being like, it's okay, blah, 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 'cause, you know, and sometimes you just don't need people to be like, you'll be fine, and it's like, yeah, I know, but right now I'm not.
Yeah, so you just don't need the words sometimes, do you?
Yeah. But yeah, because the recovery took, again, I wish someone had just said to me, like, the first 6 weeks, like, don't feel like you need to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember, I think about 3 weeks after having her, was it 3 weeks? Yeah, it must have been about 3 weeks. And obviously you go a bit stir crazy, kind of being in the house in the same room for like a couple of days. But I was like, yeah, rather than just going for a local walk, I was like, yeah, let's go into town, we'll walk around the shops and all of this.
Right.
And I can remember halfway I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I was like, I need to go back. I was like, I need to sit down.
Yeah.
I was like, I do not feel up for this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like you have that pressure to kind of be able to know how to look after a newborn. And it's not even the pressure, it's again, because no one talks about it. No one talks about that you can have a house full of people, but you can still feel lonely, because it's almost like you feel like you're the only person going through it.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you in terms of how basically the postnatal period for mothers and women and families is basically overlooked, because the focus is just the baby, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's it. You know, that's the one thing that now I kind of work in, like, the birth world, when people are like, oh, well, as long as you've got a healthy baby. And it's like, well, yeah, but if I'm not healthy and I'm not healthy myself, then how am I meant to look after a baby?
Exactly. And that's a perfect transition. So let's talk about you professionally now, because I feel like that's so important, because your work is so vital. So why did you become a doula, and why did you get into hypnotherapy?
Yeah, so I was always interested in hypnobirthing, because I used so many of the techniques, and I think that's why I lasted so long at home, is because of I used a lot of the breathing techniques rather than kind of any of the visualizations or anything. I used so many of them that it kind of took me into my own little zone. Yeah. And even though my birth didn't go to plan, not fully anyway, it was kind of like, it was still, I look back and I'm like, do you know what, I'm still really happy with that, and I look at it as a positive thing. And so many of my friends and so many people I talk to are very much like, you know, they don't see it as a positive thing. And it was almost like, I want to show people that you can have a positive birth and it can be enjoyable and you can look forward to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I came across Jen on Instagram. So I train with them through the Badass Doulas. Yeah. And I can remember they were doing like a review of some kind of like birthing documentary. And I thought, I totally agree with all of these views. Like, this program is so like shining a negative light on labour, because obviously, of course, things like one born every minute, they're not going to show a straightforward birth because it'll be boring. Like, no one wants to watch it.
Definitely.
But, you know, some people watch it and think that that's the reality. So then the more I got talking to them, I thought, actually, yeah, being a doula would be something that I want to do, because I then thought, I was very naive, thinking, you know, the fact that I went to my 6 week appointment and was like, well, I was about to say only get married. I can only give labour in the hospital because that's all they've offered me, and things like that. And it's kind of like actually having someone there to kind of, with the knowledge to explain not even what you can and can't do, because you can do whatever you want to do, but kind of back you up and talk you through everything in detail, purely because our midwives, and like you said, the NHS is just so stressed, they just can't offer that level of support, and that kind of relationship is hard to build because there's just not enough of them.
Exactly. You're completely right. And in terms of your area, like where you're based, do you feel that people are quite open-minded towards your profession, or is it still quite slow?
It's still quite new. It's definitely coming out. I think what's really helped is that, like, Meghan and Harry, so Meghan had a doula, and that's a lot more kind of spoken about now and things like that. But it helps because hypnobirthing is now a lot more kind of popular almost.
Definitely.
And actually, when I speak to people about hypnobirthing, I then kind of drop in about being a doula. And actually quite a few people have kind of, you know, even if they've just got questions about, oh, so my midwife has suggested I have a C-section because of X, Y, and Z, like, where do I stand? Do you know, kind of, can I talk to you about, like, what risks there are, like, and all of these kind of things? So it's kind of definitely getting out there, and especially now with COVID, obviously even more so. There's a lady that I know that, funny enough, only lives about 2 streets down from me, who had her first little girl when I had Shelby, so 2018, and she's now pregnant again during January. And she was saying she's yet to have a face-to-face midwife call. Meeting, because they're like, well, your pregnancy is low risk, so we're better off doing it kind of over Zoom. And she's like, it's just not the same as my firstborn. She said, I feel like, she's like, it's just a completely different experience. And actually having the doula there is then someone that you can then talk to face to face, hopefully in most areas. And you kind of get that extra support.
Definitely.
So it's someone just to kind of lean on and know that if you've got a question, you can pick up the phone. Most doulas kind of offer any time of day. You can ring, email, or text, and they'll probably reply to you. So.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's really interesting to hear, like, sort of the shift in your area and how it's changing. Well, obviously, considering the world's in a completely different situation right now, how has that been for being a doula, considering the current climate with everything going on?
Yeah, it has been hard because obviously most doulas, especially being a birth doula, so there's birth doulas and postnatal doulas. So I just do kind of like the birth and do kind of 1 or 2 visits postnatally depending on the person. But obviously the biggest thing is that someone will probably want you there for the birth.
Exactly.
Which obviously at the minute, I mean, a lot of trusts are only just allowing one birth partner.
Exactly.
So kind of unless it's a home birth, it's difficult. However, again, my doula trainer has always kind of said to us, you know, if you've done your job properly, the couple will be so informed that actually, even if you were to be there at the birth, you probably wouldn't actually be doing anything because they know what to do. They know kind of what to expect, and because you would have spoken them through every kind of stage and discussed their birth plan and discussed what might come up. If a situation was to come up, then they would probably already know how to deal with it.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously, because, you know, the world of technology nowadays, there's actually a lot that you can offer. And even, obviously, I cover my area. Sometimes I've had one lady message me and she's in Wales, who normally I wouldn't, you know, drive kind of, it'll probably take me about 4 hours to get to her. So probably would have missed the birth by then.
Exactly.
But because of, you know, Zoom and FaceTime and things like that, actually you are more likely to almost find that person you connect with better. Rather than just kind of the doulas and hypnobirthing instructors around your area. So in some ways it's been good, but it is that whole, you know, wanting someone there for the birth tends to be the big thing, which is unfortunate that unless it's a home birth, can't really happen.
Yeah, definitely. It's been hard, I think, for so many people with everything going on. But also I've realised that the concept of doulas and birth workers that are non-medically trained are not as popular in reality in many different regions. From what I've personally seen in most parts of the south, when you go into Surrey and London, they seem a bit more common and used. But for me,
Yeah,
what I've
definitely.
seen across the rest of England, doulas are not as popular now. Why do you think that could be?
I think it's because I think two reasons. God, I can't talk. I think our NHS is so good,
Yeah.
and although we talk about it kind of, you know, being stressed and stretched and everything,
Yeah.
actually the fact that in our country you get a midwife and you don't have to, like, you know, if you're in the US, you've got to pay for the midwife and things like that. And I think we do kind of take advantage of it, which, you know, we all should do.
Yeah.
And I think because the midwives are there, we just kind of assume you don't need anyone else there and don't really fully understand why you would need someone else there. And I think it's I can't remember what my other point was going to be now. So not only because of the NHS, and obviously, you know, we kind of use them to our advantage, but also a lot of people kind of, they don't fully understand why you would pay for a doula to be there when you've already got a birth partner.
Yeah.
So people tend to think that, you know, well, my birth partner's there to support me, so why would I need you there? And actually, we're there to support the birth partner as much as we are to support the birthing person. Like you know, especially I know with Max, when I was in labour, he said, when I was going through the transition stage, and he said, I could see in your voice that you were in pain. And he said, I just didn't know what to do. He was like, I didn't know where to look. He was like, I wanted to help you, but I couldn't help you.
Yeah.
And he was like, in that situation, a doula would have been great, because they would have just kind of said, you know, this is completely normal. Like, she's doing really well. It's basically the baby's about to arrive. And it's just that extra kind of, you know, nod to be like, yeah, it's fine. And then also, for what people need to understand is then when you are in labour, and the midwives, they do tend to be there for the baby, like we said, rather than the person who's actually in labour.
Yeah.
They're there to kind of, yes, obviously they're there to make sure you're okay, but ultimately kind of once you've given birth, and they kind of, you know, take the baby and they're like, right, okay, yeah, we'll weigh them, blah, 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 and all this. And it's more to make sure they're okay, and rather than looking after you. So just having that kind of someone else to support you mentally, it makes a big difference. But I think because our NHS is so good, it's hard to kind of, for people to still see that, why would you need someone that's not medically trained?
Yeah, I totally understand. And I feel that a lot of people have sort of a misperception that doulas are either extremely expensive, or you need to be a certain type of person that's all natural and home birth and no medical intervention and all this type of thing.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I get that with hypnobirthing as well. People kind of associate it with kind of actual hypnosis rather than what it actually is. So they're like, well, you know, I don't really believe in all that like airy fairy stuff. And it's like, it's nothing like that. It's basically an antenatal class with techniques on how to help you cope with it.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, like, I'm going to click my fingers and you're going to be asleep.
Definitely. Oh, it's been so nice to speak to you, because I feel like just your personality has come through the phone. Which is so nice, because with everything going online, sometimes you feel like you're going to lose that type of personal touch.
Yeah.
But no.
That's it, especially, like you said, especially in birth work and things like that. It's so kind of, it's amazing what technology can do, but it's also a bit of a shame that, sometimes it's hard to kind of get it across.
Definitely. I'm so thankful that you've come on and been able to share not just only your work life, but your personal experience as well.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, it's been a nice little chat.
Thank you so much.